Hey, that shirt you guys released the other day with like the skunk doing a burnout.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to get me one of those.
that that was actually drawn by a friend of mine who was the art director for The Simpsons. So
Wow.
I have like original sketch that he did on a napkin that just looks
Yeah.
like a pencil, like we call it skunk fink because it's kind of similar to
Yeah.
the old rat fink.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just turned it into a logo, and now is as good a time as any to pass it out. So
No, it's cool.
we'll definitely send you stuff. Like, yeah, you don't have to get it. We'll just send it to you.
Okay. I'm hovering right between large and extra large. It's not going good. I put whiskey back in my house. It's worth like 10 pounds.
It's 5 o'clock your time. It's good having everybody back. Um, I'm excited to show Jay all the stuff on the 2J.
I had a friend of mine call and he said, can you get Dave to do a 2J head? And I said, man, I don't know how to make the math work. I think if there's a guy in the industry that could do it, he's the guy, but I don't know that we can make it profitable and or even make sense.
Oh, you're
And
saying the two JK, two JZK. Okay.
that's a question that comes up. And even last week, a man called me and he's excited to tell me he's making a 2JZ head and billet. And he says, well, I kept all the stock port locations so people don't have to buy new intake manifolds and don't have to buy new headers. And I'm like, I'm not like, I don't want to sound disinterested, but I'm not interested because the head that I want has a different intake manifold, has a different header because I want the airflow,
Yeah.
you know? So
I
I've had a
am.
couple people poke in and say like, man, it's pretty cool that you're rapping with him. And I said, man, you guys really, I didn't know much about you before I came to your place. And when I came to your place, I realized that, like, you guys got a thing there. You know, I
Yeah.
said it before, but like a lot of people don't have that thing. You guys have the thing that you could actually um, develop a product that's better than the other guy.
Yeah, that's companies definitely have more of a technical focus moving forward, less nicky knack, you know.
Yeah, like I can get rods. Anybody can get a set of rods out of some place, right? But induction, optimizing the power of an engine, it takes those tools.
Yeah, it takes a lot of tools and it takes a lot of work because every part's got to be reworked. Really, it's like every time you make an improvement, you find where the next weak link is that keeping you from the
Yeah,
promised land.
understood.
You said before how you would get into the conversation of steel versus cast cam. Like,
Yeah,
um, we'll have some quantitative answers and some
man, I
nice.
tell you, that single subject is like the guys that will defend it. They'll defend it until like the hammer drops. They don't want to let it go.
Well, I mean, I showed you the PVD stuff that we've been doing for however long. I know where the limits are at. It's like
Yeah,
that's not a steel is not a last forever option. Not even in the different formulas and MotoGP. Last time in our discussion, we left off at you know, I met the right old guy. I believe was the terminology that we used. So I went to his place, went to Harvey's place, learned camshafts. Like I told you, it's like learn camshafts under the guise of buying his software. It was almost like, you can buy my software and then I'll show you how to use it. Because in all honesty, like his mindset at that time was to create as many camshaft competitors to sort of compete against Crane, his old company. There's like a whole drama that went down with that, um, which we won't get into. Did you get to look at some of those attachments, Jay?
yeah. I have them open now. They were kind of grainy when I zoomed in before, but you guys just resent me some images that I can blow up, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff to discuss.
Yeah,
So
that was
my eyes are looking off to the side. It's because I'm staring at these photos.
yeah. My thoughts on the attachments was just to you guys could look over them and then have the questions just write them down as they pop up. Especially when we start getting into a lot of the technical documents that I have in there, or like the course syllabus outline that comes out of Crane's student manual.
Yeah. All that racket um, before the valve goes into motion, is that real?
Oh, this is a so are you talking about the one we're looking at right now?
Yes.
You're talking about this chatter.
Yes.
That's just measurement error.
Okay. All right.
So
So
this is
that could be filtered out, and then
yeah, this has got this problem. Knowing Harvey, this graph here has no smoothing on it, or not a whole lot of smoothing on it.
oh, that's an interesting question. Then how much, like on a, if you pick your average dyno, whether it be a hub dyno or a wheel dyno, smoothing can hide a lot of problems. So what is the data rate collected, and what is an acceptable level of smoothing to know that you've got it right?
So first of all, when you look at this graph, these like where I drew the little green lines, that's the part of the acceleration curve. So the acceleration curve isn't actually measured. You can like you think about it, on the cam doctor, you're only measuring the lift. And so all the noise comes in on the lift measurement side of things. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because acceleration is a derivative of lift, so there's mathematical processing that goes through it, and therefore any changes in your lift data, just a little bit of jumpiness, I guess, would translate into bigger deviations in the graph each time you derive it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So like
Yep.
the if you look at it, the velocity curve is pretty. This is the velocity curve. That looks pretty smooth. But velocity is only the first derivative of lift. Acceleration is the second derivative of lift. So it actually goes through two derivations in order to get the acceleration graph. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like that's really where I wanted to start today's conversation is what is velocity, what is acceleration, what are some of the things that determine maximum velocity, what are the things that determine maximum acceleration, what are ramps, just really break down all the pieces of the camshaft in terms of its dynamics as well as its component sections.
Okay.
Right. And then I was going to go through all of the basic terms, and then we're going to take the 2JZ measurements that we have. So this was the cast 2JZ cam that you gave me to measure. It's
Okay.
been smooth. I ran 20 smoothing passes on it just to get just so it's easier to understand what's going on when we're discussing it. But let me go back to A5. You could see without a whole lot of smoothing, he was trying to figure out. So he's kind of just defining where the limits are at. Those don't change a whole lot. He didn't really focus much on the lower areas there. He just so like on this graph here, this was a measurement of the K series type R. Okay, so yeah, you can see how on the initial measurements you're just kind of figuring out where the limits are at. You know what I'm saying? You're kind of looking for the peaks.
When you say limits, who defines what a limit is?
The limit's going to be determined by various things. I think the last time in our discussion, I said it's usually mechanical that defines the limits. So, for example, if you say, what are the limits of lift? It's really going to be, how much the spring allows you to lift and how much can you fit in there, right? So it's a
Okay.
physical limit, right? So
Okay.
I think rarely do we ever reach the point of the the mechanical limits. Like last time I talked about how the radius of curvature was the final limitation in terms of peak acceleration, right? But not many cases do you need to go there. Like that's like more probably your extreme racing stuff is going to be really pushing those limits, right? When we talked about the velocity limit, so this would be the velocity limit here, right? We said the velocity limit, at least on a bucket motor, was determined by the size of the bucket. So you can see again that's a mechanical limitation, physical limitation. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I showed you the first graph or the first. This is I sent the cam into Harvey. He did the analysis on the OEM cam, and then he had me come out, and then we went through and we built a better cam. Like we built better, bigger cams, but we used the OEM cam for these different limits. Those kind of established some of the limits that we were. I guess the first step is, can you duplicate the OEM cam? Right, that's step number one. Duplicate the OEM cam within the same limits as the OEM cam. If you make something bigger and you respect those same limits, the reality is it's gonna work fine in the engine, even though it's a bigger cam, because you aren't exceeding the actual dynamic limits, right? So it's like, sure, the lift is higher, but usually when the lift gets higher, the duration gets bigger too. And that's why I showed you this graph last time, because these all have essentially the same. These are acceleration rates. And then along this line of all of these same acceleration rates, you're going to have a lift, and you're going to have a different lift and duration. So like this one here, if you just kind of look, does that make sense? So all of these cams here essentially function the same because they have the same accelerations and they have the same limits. It's just one's bigger, but the duration got bigger too.
Okay.
Right? If I made it taller without making the duration bigger, then that's a different story. Then that acceleration goes way up.
Right.
Then that might be on a line up here.
Yep. No,
Right.
I completely grasp that.
And taking a step back, and I don't know if we defined it in the first few episodes, but did we define or go through the terminology with defining lift versus duration
on my chart there, we start out. So the story starts out. We go to Harvey's, and then what are we learning at Harvey's? And we got to start off with, what are the parts of the cam? What is lift? What is velocity? What is acceleration? What is jerk? Right. So I think last time we used this graph, right? So this is lift. This one here. Positive acceleration. And then this is how do I go back? So lift is measured in, let's say, inches. Okay. Right. Velocity is a derivative of lift, Velocity is the rate of change of lift, so it's the amount of inches per degree. Okay, and then acceleration is the amount of inches per degree squared. And then jerk is inches over degree cube. So I'll let that sink in. It means very different things to me. I need you. I need you guys to kind of ask me questions as to like if you whether you get it or not. You know?
Sure. I mean, well,
Can I be dumb for a second?
Yeah.
So this is easy. The lift is easy. Um, the velocity is um, a rate of change over some level of uh, speed, and then the acceleration is a zoomed in version of the velocity, and the jerk is even zoomed in further.
Yeah. So acceleration is rate of change of change of velocity, right? And jerk is rate of change of acceleration.
Okay.
And then, Harvey liked to say snap, crackle, and pop. Which would be the fourth derivative, the fifth derivative, and the sixth derivative. But I don't know what those do. Like I think he almost said it as a fun thing because I really don't know what the importance of snap is over jerk.
It's been a long time since I've heard snap on top of jerk. Those are old Waikai terms.
Yeah, so like if I was doing snap, I would be looking at the jerk graph and then look at not the jerk graph, I would be looking at the jerk data and just kind of see how the jerk progresses. Like especially mainly in the nose area. The nose is kind of an important area. Jerk, I think lift is clear. That's obvious. Uh, Velocity, I think, is pretty obvious. Acceleration, I think, is pretty obvious. We're used to all of those terms. And then jerk is a term that gets thrown around a lot. I don't know if people really know what it means or understand what it is. So for me, the easiest way for me to explain jerk is okay, I can reach maximum acceleration either gradually or like really punchy. So high jerk is really punchy. Like
Right.
you're getting to the maximum acceleration really fast,
Right. No,
right?
I understand that now. It's So with that being said, is jerk what when you watch a spintron and it initially like hits that spring and you see the shockwave go down the spring, that's jerk. The rate that the valve is excited, the initial excitement.
It could be, but it kind of depends on where the jerk happens because
probably good to show an example of, and I'm familiar with seeing that change in jerk on valve close, right? So after, peak lift, as it's coming down, it's more pronounced as the valve is slamming on the seat.
I don't know if that's jerk either. So the reason why I say that is because remember we're talking about the terminology, how the ramp is here, right? Remember that?
Yep.
Ramp. Well, where is ramp on this graph? I mean, ramp, this point here, I would call the ramp from 0 to peak acceleration, right? Now, this could be anywhere between 10 thousandths of an inch and, who knows, maybe 30 plus thousandths of an inch
Of valve movement.
of valve movement, right? So if okay, let's see where the this is where the peak jerk is at. That's where the peak jerk is at right here, right? But your lash might be, you know what I'm saying? The point where the lash picks up might already be past that jerk peak. Same thing on the closing side, right? So we have this jerk peak here, but if this is our closing point, this peak is already past our closing point. So it's actually invisible. Like there's arguments about how important jerk is, and a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on jerk. And like Harvey was one of those guys, but I think it's because he was focused on what the machine sees, and I'm more focused on what the engine sees. Like he's looking for perfection from the base circle all the way around, right? And if he got some really crazy jerk numbers like that, the machine might error out. I don't know what the deal is. Like, you know, he just says, like he set his jerk limit at, is it 301, 401? I could be missing a zero on the jerk side. So
And what are some of the other factors in the actual valve train that attribute to this change in jerk while we're talking about it?
the jerk is more a byproduct of how you design the ramp. So you could design ramps with very low jerk. You could design ramps with a low peak. You can also design ramps with like a constant.
So going back to what you just said with Harvey searching for perfection with little to no jerk,
Something like this would be a constant. Like I just drew a constant jerk. So I set a limit for how high the jerk can go on the positive side, and then it just kind of it forces you to kind of stretch it out a little bit in order to do that. Like the jerk stuff is so much more critical on the hydraulic stuff. I would say, because the hydraulic comes from zero. The hydraulic sees, you know, the hydraulic sees all of the jerk.
Right, because there's no lash.
Right.
You're in constant contact.
Right. We have to have a clear understanding of lift, velocity, acceleration, jerk, what they do, you know, and then we can start talking about what is aggressive. Like I really want to talk about what is aggressive. Like
Well, I want to just understand if the lash on a solid lifter, if a lash could be where you have where the lash intersects the jerk, where the take up ramp and the kind of like skips over the jerk. If someone doesn't have a real clear understanding of what jerk is, um, how does it affect the camshaft's performance having this flat jerk versus a lot of jerk versus no jerk? Like, how do you tie that into the design of the camshaft?
I generally try to set some limits when I'm doing the jerk, and I try not to exceed those limits. So, and just as a matter of just practice, you know, I try to design stuff that's not too crazy, or like, let me see.
I guess to take it a step back, my question would be looking at the two extremes. Like, what are the downsides of having no jerk versus the downsides of having too much? I mean, looking at the two extremes to better give an
Yeah,
understanding of.
no, I could I understand that.
You can't have no jerk, because to have no jerk, you would have zero acceleration.
Mhm.
Right? Jerk zero is jerk zero is acceleration zero. Right. So there's always going to have to be uh, a jerk component to it. So like obviously if you stretch out the acceleration periods or you change those shapes, that affects the jerk. So if I have the acceleration appear like all happening within a shorter amount of duration, a shorter amount of degrees, then the jerk is naturally going to be higher than something with longer degrees.
Correct. And I guess that follows up to the same question is when you find that extreme, like, do we have any pictures or examples of those extremes? Like, where are those limits? And let's pick an engine. Let's just say in reference to the K, right? Where are some of the places we will start to see some of the downsides of that extreme with those insane accelerations?
Yeah, I don't know if so. Like on the K, like I said, we're the peak jerk is already happening at a place that's underneath our lash height, so I'm not too worried about that, right?
There's a lot of, I think, terminology that we need to note and define to help users, because lash is something that we throw around all the time, right? It's on every cam card, it's everywhere. And the general audience just knows I need to set my lash here, but they don't understand why they need to set, or what the rule of thumb is and what lash is actually doing in this equation.